Hi, I'm Kara. Welcome to the SugarPea Designs channel. We're so glad you're here, and today we're creating a warm autumn wool background. So we're going to use stamps from GNOME for Christmas and Sweet as Pie, this pumpkin, and Fall Fox. We'll use this pumpkin and the sentiment, and we'll use the buffalo check background stamp. We'll also use the zigzag stitched rectangles and the curve from the card front element builder. So to start, I'm going to stamp out my images in Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I will Copic color them today. And I'm going to mask off the top of that sled because it's going to have some pumpkins sitting on it. So I've got to figure out where that pumpkin goes, stamp that down, and then I'll mask this one as well so that the larger pumpkin can be stamped to look like it's behind the smaller pumpkin. Get that all set, and also I'm going to mask the little hand of the gnome so that he's carrying his lantern. And now that that's all stamped, we can take off the masks and it's stamped the way I wanted it. So now I'm going to work with the buffalo check background, and I'm going to start with green tea and stamp that down. And next I'm going to shift it over 1/4 of an inch. So I look at the lines on my MISTI and I'm just slipping it over to the next line over. And I'm going to use Mandarin Spice and stamp that down. And this is going to create some brown because orange and green is going to kind of give me a brown look. But I want a little bit more of a brown and darker green. So I'm going to take this, slip it over just 1/8 of an inch, so halfway back over to that first line that I used, and then I'll come in with the eucalyptus, which is a darker green, a little bit brighter green, not as much a yellow green as the green tea was. And there, that looks like a skirt I'm sure my mother wore in the 70s, a wool plaid wraparound skirt. Anyway, now I turned it one full turn, and I came back with green tea, and I'm stamping that on the horizontal there. So my plaid is all set. It kind of looks like wool, scratchy wool to me. I'll use that to guide my coloring. So I did a full coat of YR04, and now I'm coming in with shading with a YR07. And I'm not going to show all the coloring today, like on the sled, and just a few of the areas that aren't very interesting, but I will show you the pumpkins and parts of the gnome. So now I'm blending that back in with the YR04 just to get it blended, and then come in with the E07, and that'll be my darkest color, and that will give it some real dark shadows and match up with the plaid and also the zigzag stitched rectangle in orange that you see there. All right, blending that in then to kind of give it that smoother look and to build up the darkness of the color of these pumpkins. And then I'll blend it further in with the YR04. Now once I have the pumpkins all blended in, it's time for the green, which I'm using the YG13 as a base coat, and then I come in with the YG17 to give those stems some shadow. But I also will come in with the E55 once I've blended this in, just to give it kind of a darker look, kind of like when the green and orange overlapped each other in the plaid. So now I'm going to start on my gnome, and I first figure out where I wanted these shadows with a lighter warm gray, and now I'm coming in with the W1 to put in just the lines just over where I had decided I wanted them. And then I can take the lightest warm gray, the W00, and blend those out into the rest of his beard and mustache. And just making sure I've got that blended well enough. I want to keep kind of a white appearance to his beard there. And now we can start on his shirt, and he is wearing a shirt that matches those pumpkins. So just a full coat of the YR04, coming in with the YR07 to shade. And then I'm going to come in with the E07 to give him some darker shadows around his beard. And then just blend that all out. So this is the way he's going to camouflage himself in the pumpkin patch. If a human should come by, he can just duck down and pretend to be a pumpkin. So he has his orange shirt, and then he'll have a green hat on. So now, just to get his nose and his hands, I use an E00, and then I'm going to put in a shadow there with the E21, and then blend that out with the E00. There we go. So here's his hat, and it's gonna start with the YG13, and I'm just deciding where I want it to be the darkest, kind of round it out, and then down where you can see a little kind of a lip around there, that's I want to make that a little more prominent. So dark around his nose and mustache, and then it's going to kind of be a little rim. So I'll darken that up with the YG17, and there's where that little ridge starts to come in. And again, I will darken it up around his nose and mustache so that it has that shadow there. And then blend things out with the YG13. And you can see I already colored his pants and shoes and his lantern. There wasn't too much to show with that, but with the hat, it's kind of nice to see how I blended this. So this is the lightest. This is the YG11 to give the highlights, and it just blends in from that YG13. So now you can kind of see that little rim on his hat kind of coming out a little bit now. And it just gives him kind of a little more detail to where it would roll down onto his face. And I'm coming back in with that darkest one, the YG17, because I've blended a lot of that real dark color away, so I want to get that back in there. And just kind of gives it that depth again. I fussy cut these images out because I had placed the lantern in his hand and pumpkins on the sled, so I wanted to, I wouldn't have a die that would cut that out in that way. I could have stamped them all individually and then cut them with a die and arrange them together, but I wanted to stamp them together. So here I'm just adding some detail with my Prismacolor black brush marker so that there aren't any white edges. And I want to use a blending brush and ink up this green so it's not so bright. It's a little more of a green yellow with the green tea, and then with the eucalyptus as well to darken it up a little bit, just so that it matches better with my plaid that we created. And then also with my sentiment panel, I want to put the Mandarin Spice ink on there as well to kind of mimic the same look. So I'm going to heat emboss this sentiment. So I use a anti-static pad to prep the paper, and then I use some Versamark ink and stamp that sentiment out. And then I'm going to use some Simon Says Stamp fine detail white embossing powder to emboss that. And I'll take that to my heat tool and heat that up, which will melt that, and it's all set to go. So I'm going to use the largest of the zigzag stitched rectangles to cut out my panel and also that grass. And now I just need to assemble the card. So I adhere the grass, and then deciding where I want the gnome and his sled so I can decide what color to put inside the lantern. I wasn't sure if it was on the grass or the plaid, so I waited. But this is the YG11 just to give it a look like you can kind of see the grass behind it. But then I'll use a white signal pen to give a little detail to make it look like it's shining like a piece of glass. And then I'm going to take a piece of floss, and that'll be his rope that goes from his hand with a glue dot. So I'm using a mini glue dot behind his hand, and that rope will go to the sled, and it's going to go to the wooden part, the upper part, as though it was attached there and that he's pulling his little sled. And he's a gnome. He can do what he wants. He can pull a sled on grass. You know, they're kind of magical that way. All right, so now I'm going to put down some adhesive and put those down. Now I did get a little tear on my lantern, but that's okay because once I adhere it down, no one will know. It's you can't really see where it broke apart. But that's what happens when you cut very thin things. And I'm going to put the whole panel on a 5.5 by 4.25 inch note card, and it's a top folding card, and then put on my sentiment panel. Well, I hope you enjoyed the card today and seen just one way of the many ways to use the buffalo check background stamp. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Bye!